All right, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to another amazing session with my favorite, Mido and Baba, two of my favorite people on the planet. Hi, Mido.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
What's up with you? Where are you?
I'm 18 years old now. I've just started my freshman year of college.
Wow.
I'm back from my second week.
All right.
It's been going good.
Yeah, so what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about some of the things I think I've noticed in a lot of my friends here in Ohio or across, I don't know, all my areas of friends.
Cool.
In California or even across the waters. Something I've noticed is that there's just a general amount of apathy towards a lot of these topics. Yesterday, when we had the prayer, you were talking about how when God looks in your soul and sees that you truly don't care, there's something wrong with you, right? And something I've noticed in not even just my friends care more than I'd say the average person my age, but a lot of people, they don't care and they don't know, and if they do know, they still don't really care. And I don't think that this is just an issue with my generation. I think it's with a lot of generations.
When you say no, do you mean, are you talking about God?
Well, so let's take the example from yesterday. The refugees that were gunned down, 50,000 of them. I think if I were to tell the majority of people that I meet day to day about that, they would look at me, they'd think I'm kind of weird for telling them that, but they'd look at me and they would say, so what? They'd say maybe, oh, that's horrible. They'd say, I feel so bad for those people. And then the next day they would wake up, they would think maybe that was weird, and then they'd go on about their day.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to you is just, what causes that? Or maybe not even what causes that, but what do you do to cope knowing that the majority of people don't care?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not just your generation. I mean, and there are so many things that are it's even difficult sort of to think of where to start. Okay, well, a good starting point is that think of like your function in society, yours or any other human being in our society, in the United States, or in societies like the United States. And from the time that you gain any level of awareness, you come with a label to this life, and the label is economic interest. You represent a consuming unit. So from the time you are anything, there are so many vested interests that are always approaching you or approaching your parents, approaching your parents until you're an adult and you go to college, then they're directly approaching you. And what they're always trying to do at every level is to sell you stuff. Everything that attracts your attention is social media. Everything that attracts your attention about anything in life really is to get you to work with the system, or basically you contribute your labor, whatever your labor is, to serve financial interests that ultimately, also at the same time that they're interested in your labor, they're interested in you using things, in convincing you that you need things, you should have things, and then for you to go after these things and say, okay, well, yeah, in order to be happy, I need this, in order to be satisfied, I need that, and so on. And our entire society is not structured to tell you you should care about others, is not structured to tell you your value is about making a difference, is not structured to tell you, you have the ability to help others. That comes from sort of another awareness. That doesn't come from the way society is organized, because all the sort of the institutionalized powers in society are not served with convincing you or convincing others that you should live meaningful lives that actually contribute values beyond consumption. So the sad reality is that what all these people that you're talking about don't realize. The irony is like there's a lot of dogma, a lot of rhetoric that tries to tell you, oh, you're an autonomous human being. You have your own free will. You have liberty. You have freedom. But in reality, from the very beginning, there's just this intense process of brainwashing that tells you your value is to work for us, your value is to contribute labor and we pay you, and then you should take the money we pay you and you should make us richer. You should buy stuff. So the executives, the people who control the flow of money in our world. And so when someone comes as you heard on the khutbah, and I'm talking about, people being trafficked, people being bought and sold like slaves on the American border, or talking about 60,000 refugees that were murdered in the Egyptian desert, or talking about thousands of refugees are being murdered in the Saudi desert. It is the reason you get that sort of surprised, like, huh? What are you talking about? Is because all these kids, all these people, they don't hear this. This is not what is being, this is not what's competing for their attention on a daily basis. It is the oddity, it is the outlier, it is the weird thing off. So it's like suddenly, basically, when you're coming and telling them something like that, is that at the same time there's an implication, right? It's like, okay, so the implied conversation is, I'm telling you this information because you should care, and you should care because you can make a difference. And their immediate thought process is, this is so out of the frame. How am I supposed to make a difference? Okay, so let's say I do care. What difference does it make? But of course, they don't realize, well, there are, it is their government, it is the government that they voted into power that gives weapons to the Egyptians and gives the logistical information and the technical information and the technology to kill the refugees in the desert. It is their government that gives the weapons and gives the scientific information to the Saudis to kill refugees in the desert. It is their government that adopts policies that has an immediate impact on whether people are able to engage in modern day slavery or not at the American border. So you're, it's like one of the hardest things, and I encounter this all the time, even law students. You know, law students, and this is like, you know, a version of your friends, but more advanced. Just this all happens is that they now finish college and applied and went to law school. But law students, you know, they think to themselves, the easy route in life is for me to study hard, to get the grades, to go for an interview, to get an offer, to get a job. And in the job, if I do what I'm told, and what you're told to do is to, you know, serve the interests of the clients of the law firm. If I do what I'm told, I'll get paid. And if I get paid, I have a stable, nice, secure life. And okay, that's the easy route. The hard route is to start thinking like, okay, what work should I do to actually make a difference about these issues? So should I go work, I mean, an obvious example, should I go work for the ACLU, for instance? Or should I go work for the National Lawyers Guild? Or should I even, with my friends, create a new organization that becomes like the ACLU? Like we could get together and create a new organization. Or should I work for one of the firms that lobbies lawmakers to engage in moral policies? You know, it's harder route. Why is it a harder route? Because you're going to make less money. You are going to be living constantly, you know, some days are going to be happy because you're going to make a difference. But many days you're going to be disappointed because you're getting a lot of resistance. So, you know, the sad reality is that the majority of people don't care. And that is why we live in an unjust world. If people, the majority of people cared, the world we would live in would be very different. But there's always a minority. And when I say minority, I mean a really small minority that does care. And I'll tell you what, it is that small minority of people that does care, that work to make a difference, that have prevented human civilization from collapsing, and that constantly prevents human civilization from being disastrously immoral. I mean, think of this small minority of people that through their activism and their sacrifice, they taught the rest of humanity that didn't care, that slavery is wrong, and that insisted that slavery is wrong and must be abolished. It took them centuries. It took that small minority. It's not true that the majority of people supported the abolition of slavery. The majority of people were fine with slavery. But it took that small minority to make all the difference.
And two small points that I think I would add on there is that, you know, when you're one of these minority that care, it changes you at a fundamental level.
Yeah.
Right? Every single decision you make day to day, how you spend your time, the people you spend it with, it all changes. But second point, it's also incredibly lonely, I think.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, it's like, okay, you are the company you keep. Okay? If you start caring, you're absolutely right, it changes you. If you start caring about causes, and what will happen is that the people that don't care will give up on you and will lose interest in you. But you will run into, and you will attract the attention of that small minority of people that care. And I tell you, the company and the friendship of these people are far more meaningful than, all the friends that live amoral lives. I mean, I think what might also be impacting you, or color your perception, is that your father is a bit unusual, because with me, as your father, it is the path is extremely lonely. But the reason my path is extremely lonely is because I care, and all my advocacy, all my work insists on a distinctly Islamic perspective and a distinctly Islamic identity. And unfortunately, we are living in an age where the vast majority of Muslims feel defeated and broken. And so you don't find a lot of Muslims that can provide companionship. If I was not Muslim, I, I would have probably had far more companionship than I do. And so, you know, and it's not just any Muslim, it's because the role of a Muslim scholar. And when you're a Muslim scholar, it's a particularly lonely road, because, you know, Muslim scholars that are real scholars, in so many parts of the world, they're persecuted, they're thrown in prison, they're tortured. And in countries like the US or, Europe generally, there aren't that many Muslim scholars. So the road of a Muslim scholar, I think, is a particularly lonely one and a difficult one in the age we live in. But I don't think that the moral road necessarily is as lonely. I think that, I'm just thinking of people that, for instance, have dedicated their lives to fighting human trafficking. And it is fair to say that they have, they're smaller cliques of people, but they grow bonded with people that share their moral vision. But definitely, especially in your age, it would be lonely, because you would be a very small minority. People who actually care. Um, the more you spend time, I think you will run into other people from that small minority who also care about things like that.
Yeah. And going back to college, I think I am starting to, I guess, shed a lot of my friends who, where they place their time, where they place their care is not about other people, but, themselves, their careers, or even just partying and drinking and having the fun of college. But yeah, it's starting to feel, I guess, a little bit lonely. So.
Well, I really pray that I mean, part of it also, you're still just at the very beginning of the road, and you haven't yet found out the circles in your school environment of students that are involved in activity like that. I mean, there might be professors who work with students at university that are active in moral causes, and then if you find out who these professors are, then you'll also meet the students who are within the circle, and so on. And that inevitably takes time, and takes experience. But it part of growing up, there are people that, I mean, the thing about there are people who go to college and they have this. I personally think it's just a completely crazy philosophy. It's like, oh, this is the time to have fun, so I should have fun because after college I'm supposed to get serious. So what is the fun that you're going to do? Well, I'm going to drink and party and basically engage in harming myself. And it gets old, and it gets the meaninglessness of it, and starts getting to these people very quickly, and many of them can't transition from. And this is like the untold story that you don't find in the media, you don't find in advertising and stuff like that. Is that many of them can never transition from the person that indulges in frivolous activity to a person who actually gets serious about life. So, and so when they finish college, they actually spend their adulthood sort of bitter, in part constantly. Their heydays, they peaked in their college years, and the rest of their life they're just living on the memory of their college years, and that's very sad.
It's a depressing thought.
Yeah, but it's a reality for so many. Now, there are people that, in college, they finally get serious about their career, but all of their ideas about their career is about material things. I'm working hard because I want a good job, and I want good pay, and I want good money, and I want to be able, basically. And again, they live their life, they consume everything they want to consume, but by the time they get to the end of life, life feels like a resounding emptiness. It's like you've went through all of it, and all the things that you've consumed and you've enjoyed eventually get old. Eventually, all pleasure from what you've indulged in evaporates. And again, ultimately, you're left with that emptiness. The moral life, the Islamic life, is a life of full meaning. And the most important thing about it is that you see through the falsehoods early on in life. So you see through the fact that we live in a universe, and we think that this universe is permanent, or that this universe is real, but in reality, we're like living within a sphere that is encapsulated, but beyond that little sphere are other spheres that is far beyond the reality that we live in. I mean, everything we engage in, we're engaging in such a small part of what is real. And when you have this understanding, you also understand that what you do is very meaningful, because when you die, death is not the end. Death is just the beginning. And that whatever you are doing, it will have reverberations and implications and results and consequences after death. And it's a completely different attitude, because then when people come to terms with the fact that it's all going to end with death, if they see nothing beyond death, it's an extremely depressing thought. It's like, okay, I've done all of this and then I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And then what? But if they are able to believe that death is the beginning, not the end, it's the beginning of another life and the beginning of an entirely different reality, and a reality within dimensions out of space and time, it's a completely different outlook, and it's a completely different liberation.
So I guess in regards to my friends, considering all of that, I ask a lot of them why they want to go to college, or even what they want to do with their life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of their answers end at, have a stable job, be happy, and have a job I enjoy.
Yeah.
Get married maybe, for some of my friends, and that's where their answer ends. So,
Do you know the percentage of adults who have jobs that they hate?
it's like
yeah,
80
Yeah.
something percent, yeah.
I mean, the likelihood is that, yeah, you're gonna, but ultimately you'll end up in a job that, I think like a big, but although we don't like to admit that, one of the ways that what motivates us in our life, for a lot of the people you're talking about, is fear. Because from the very beginning, you're weaned on anxiety, the anxiety that the day is going to come where I don't have a job, I can't pay my bills, what's going to happen to me? I mean, if I don't have a job, then I'm not going to have social respect. And if I don't have social respect, no one is going to take care of me. No one is going to, and so am I going to end up in the street? Am I going to end up, living in the streets? Or am I going to end up not being able to, am I going to end up disrespected in society? So it's like anxiety and fear. And anxiety and fear is a very powerful way to control people. If you can keep people anxious and scared, and nothing addresses anxiety and fear like belief in God. If you don't believe in God, then yeah, then you'll be driven, regardless of whatever you say, what is really driving you is anxiety and fear. And you're scared about what's going to happen. But if you think about it, that's not a very cheerful idea, is it? What's driving me is I'm really scared about what's going to happen tomorrow. And even when you get a job, then what drives you? Well, I'm scared about being laid off. And if I'm laid off, I'm scared about finding another job. Okay, I'm paying my bills today, but how about, am I going to be able to pay my bills tomorrow? The longer you live, the longer the bigger your expenses. You start out, I can afford a small apartment, and as long as I afford my food. But pretty soon your expenses start expanding. You have bills, car bills, you have kids, you have a spouse, you have college fees, you have, and the reason that people suffer from, so our society suffers from a lot of depression, suffers from a lot of suicide, suffers from a lot of addiction and alcoholism and drug addiction, so on, is because of this very high levels of anxiety and fear that are always there. The style of thing, I mean, what we're talking about when you say that I live my life to defined not by the social prestige I achieve, but by my ability to help others, it's a completely different frame of mind. You're not being driven by this anxiety and fear anymore. What drives you is meaning. What drives you is a sense of morality. And especially if you believe in God, then what drives you is, you're constantly feeling that God is your friend and your caretaker. And that's just a very different outlook, a very different thing. And I think if you start like interrogating your friends, okay, so you will always find this anxiety and fear at the heart of everything. And I think it's the most brilliant instrument of control. Like in medieval age feudalism, they used to control people by brute force.
Right.
In modernity, we don't need brute force to control people.
No.
We can just scare them all the time. If you don't play the game, you will end up being rejected by society, marginalized by society, and on the margins, it's a very lonely place to be. I mean,
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, how do I help my friends? Or can I even help my friends? Because, I care about these people a lot, but I know that maybe the best thing to do for them is just to let them live their lives and find it out by themselves eventually.
I mean, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. But what you can do, I mean, a lot of them, it's unfair because a lot of them might have never had the type of conversations you've had and might have never been exposed to any examples in life other than, that would teach them anything differently. So what you can do is, to the extent that you can have conversations, you might expand their horizons a little bit. That's one. The other thing is nothing, especially with people that admire you or respect you, is through example. I mean, I can't tell you how many lives have been affected by just a friend seeing what another friend does. And when they see that you're volunteering in something or that, and then you're talking about your volunteer work, that could have a very real impact. A lot of times just lecturing is not going to work. Think of you don't respond to lectures, but you might respond to someone who's showing you an impressive example of something.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's God's will that we have free will and that we all get to define whatever lives we live. And that's the way God wanted creation. And so, you always have to respect that free will, even if you passionately disagree with it.
I guess I have one last question for you. It's kind of selfish, but what's the consequence for mediocrity for those of us who are aware of this other side of life, not what we've been hand-fed, but, you know, truly caring and, you know, everything you've explained so far.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, it's just fair that the more a person knows, the more a person is accountable. And in the same way that, you know, you don't judge a 3-year-old the same way that you judge a 15-year-old. And you don't judge a 15-year-old the same way that you judge a 30-year-old. Why? Because their relative amount of knowledge is different. And so your judgment of them is in relation to their level of knowledge. And it's true, it's the same thing. When you know, God allows a human being to have, through opportunities in life, through experiences in life, to have a greater level of moral understanding, their accountability increases. And there are people that just have not had the opportunity for moral understanding. And, but, you know, so it just, you know, the reality is that the more you know, the more that justly God expects from you. And because that education that you got is not happenstance, it's not coincidence. It was intentionally willed by God for you. So, you know, it is not a coincidence that, for instance, you're my son. God picked you for that. And that has consequences. You know, it just is.
Yeah, just is. Okay.
Well,
You
Awesome.
satisfied? I'm satisfied.
alhamdulillah.
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 Assalamu
Thank you
alaikum.
guys so much, and I'm looking forward to the next session, inshallah. Thank you.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.